All right, welcome everybody to Inside the Coach's Office. I'm your host Dan Murphy, along with my co-host Brian Barnes. Brian, how are we doing today?
Hey, not too bad. It's just it's starting to feel like December and January here in
Yeah,
Michigan, right?
it's
And
wintertime now.
getting used to that, and I'm never ready for it. Although it started out kind of wet and not fun for fall, but then now it's just kind of snowing and it's kind of calm and quiet, so not completely terrible, I guess, right? But it's a little early for you and me, I take it, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like after Halloween, I'm ready for it. It's when you get
Hmm.
those rare snowfalls before Halloween, or when Halloween's real nasty.
Yeah.
Halloween was actually pretty nice this year, so I'll take it. You get to the second week of November when you start getting the snow. I can live with it, I guess. But
Fair point. You know.
it definitely always looks nice. Looks better than it feels when you walk outside.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep, no doubt.
But we're used to it. We're Michiganders. We're used to
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
But let's go ahead and get into it, Brian. The Lions get it, a big bounce back win over the Commanders, 44-22. As we've talked about, this was another example where the Lions, come back after a loss, and they have not lost back-to-back games since October of 22, which is really one of the most incredible stats in the NFL, I think, going right now. And they continue that streak. And they really, I mean, you could not ask for anything more offensively, scoring on every single drive until the end of the game when they finally, the last drive they took a knee to end the game. But every drive they scored. And, the biggest thing out of this game, Brian, is it appears that Dan Campbell has taken over the play calling. What are your thoughts initially from this game and overall? Dan Campbell taking over the play calling is obviously the big story coming out of this one.
Yeah, for sure. So last week we had talked about the importance of these next two games with the Lions schedule, right? And there was some concern that if they didn't win this game against Washington, they're in desperation mode going into Philadelphia, and then if they lose that, they're 5-5. But Washington is definitely banged up, and they're playing their backup quarterback, right? And so it kind of felt like going into it, the Lions were this is a prototypical bounce back game, right? And that's what happened. And um, definitely both sides of the ball played really well, but especially on offense, like you mentioned. And obviously the commentators and everybody on Twitter talked about Dan Campbell taking over the play calling. And my initial thoughts were not that I didn't think it was happening, but it's hard to imagine Dan Campbell not being in or not have been in every offensive meeting those guys had, right? And he had his hand in everything. And I kind of thought that from the get go. And then I'm watching the game, and he had his play card, and he was talking when they were on offense. And I'm like, okay, he is being a little bit more vocal. It seems like when the Lions had the ball. And then, but part of me was like, maybe the Lions would have done this anyway, just because Washington is bad and they're struggling, and they're, like I said, they're banged up, and it could, and like, so I wasn't sure. And then at the press conference, it was confirmed that, like, yeah, he did take over, and his reasons made sense. At sometimes as a head coach, when things aren't going great, um, whether you truly believe it's going to make a huge difference or not, right? You got to make a change, right? And obviously, we heard all week about the Lions and their third down struggles, and they were awesome today on third down. Um, so that didn't surprise me, I guess. I'm coming to find out that yes, he did take over more of the play calling. But again, I do believe it's a collaborative effort, when those things happen, because it's not always easy to call a game from the sideline, right? Because again, your view is
Yeah.
different, and that's why offensive coordinators sit up in the press box. A lot of them do. You rely on the guys up there. So, but great job today. It worked out, right? And I mean, and they're all pros, coaches, and they're gonna do what they have to do to win football games, and it worked for them today.
Yeah, let's go ahead and we got a clip from Dan Campbell's press conference, and this is from the Detroit Lions Twitter page. Put this out, and just him talking about the taking over the play calling.
Statement today was
I can't see. I can't see anymore.
But you talked about some changes coming. I mean, just talk about it. It appeared as if you were calling players. What was the mindset behind changing things up, man? Were you calling the plays?
Yeah, it was just let's try something a little different, right? And look, I know I know what I want to do. I know how I want to do it. Now, that being said, this is a collaborative effort now. I mean, I was taking input from John Morton that whole time and the other coaches. So, hey, man, what do you think here? Third down. All right, we get into this. 3rd and 7 plus, blah, 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 blah. All right, where are we at? Give me the. So, this is, man, this is all encompassing. You know, man, we all work together. Coaches did a hell of a job. But I just wanted to change it up a little bit. You know, let's just see if you know, maybe a different play caller can maybe get us a little rhythm. That's all. And it honestly is nothing more than that. You know, I know you're probably going to want to ask questions about, well, what about this, or I heard this. It's not that. This was a change. We made a change. It was good for today.
So you heard him there, Brian. Obviously, he doesn't want to throw John Morton under the bus, but it's hard not to think like, yeah, there's some issues. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there has to be some issues to make such a drastic move. And Dan Campbell's trying to underplay it a little bit and still saying, you know, John Morton's obviously a huge factor, which he still is. Obviously, he's the guy in the booth, as you talked about. You got to lean on your guys in the booth to help you out if you're going to be the play caller on the field. But obviously, for him to make that type of change and take over the play calling, there had to be some issues.
For sure. And again, it can be as simple as going back to it like if things are going to go bad or it's going to go this way, then it's going to fall on me as the head coach, right? And he's going to take the hit one way or another. And so to his credit, yeah, they did extremely well today, and he has a history of that. You know, if you remember his, I think it was his first year with the Lions when Anthony Lynn was the coordinator, right? And there was a time where he said he's taken over. I can't remember what week it was of that season, but he took over the play calling and finished out the year. So it wasn't like this hasn't been done before under a Dan Campbell regime. But again, he is right though. Like, no, he's not throwing John Morton under the bus, but it is a collaborative effort, right? It is more of a it has to be. It's a multitude of things. It's matchups, right? It's what the defense is in, and you know, I mean, we have nothing to compare it to other than results, right? But it would be awesome to sit in that room and say, like, maybe there were some differences in personnel or what specifically, like, you know, run game downs compared to pass game downs, like what their thinking was. Like that would be a pretty cool deep dive, you know, one day to look into to see really what the major difference is, other than the results against a pretty bad team. Right. And I'm not downplaying I'm not downplaying Dan Campbell what he did today, obviously, right? They scored 44 points. It was awesome. But I would just like, it would be cool, right, from a fan perspective or from our, you know, geeky coach perspective to kind of see like what really the difference was for them.
Oh yeah, to be a fly on the wall in those meetings this week, because you know there had to have been some pretty tough conversations that were had between John Morton and Dan Campbell, because you can't imagine John Morton's like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead, take the play calling from me. Right. He was hired as the offensive coordinator, was hired to be the play caller, and you're midway through this season, and they were still, I mean, they went into the game as one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL. So it's not like he's done a horrendous job, but obviously there was things that were not being done that Dan Campbell wanted done, and he felt the need to have to take over the play calling to ensure that those things are being done. And I think a lot of it is just making sure that, you know, everybody's getting involved. You know, the big thing was Jameson Williams wasn't touching the ball enough. Yeah, I mean, you saw it today. I mean, plays were specifically drawn up for him to get the ball. But you go back to it, like I think this is going to be a lot easier to tell and a lot easier to make an analysis of this whole thing after next week, when they go to Philadelphia and play Philadelphia. A much better defense, a much better team, a Super Bowl caliber team in Philadelphia than it was against Washington, who's just obviously in dire straits right now.
Yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs felt like a lot more involved today. Remember, that's one of the things we talked about last week, where he really didn't feel like he did a whole lot last week. But like there's a lot of great offensive coordinators who might not be great play callers, and vice versa, right? It's still, a lot of it is, I'm sure there's still like a combination of John Morton's scheme and thoughts and Dan Campbell's thoughts before they even hired him, right? They obviously had to be on the same page to some degree. I mean, it wasn't like the Lions back in the day when, hey, Mike Martz is the OC and it's like, here, you just go do your thing, right? Like, I don't think it was like that at all. But yeah, you're right. Next Sunday is going to be fun and interesting, and that's another big test. But man, huge win today. So for the Lions, because again, you look around the NFL and especially the Central. God, I'm aging myself, but the NFC North, right? Look at the Bears won again today. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's got to win games, right? It would look really good because we've talked about it before. The Lions would feel really good if they can beat the Eagles, simply because the next 3 games are at home, and I think they're favored. They're going to be favored in all 3.
Yeah.
So next week is pretty important. And I thought they got out of the game today relatively healthy. Like the Penei Sewell stuff early on was a
That was scary. Yeah.
scary, right? Because you could argue with all the players on their roster, you could argue he's the most valuable player on their roster. Even though I said Jahmyr Gibbs might be the best player in the NFL.
Well, I mean, especially
but
considering the injuries they already have, and Frank Ragnow obviously leaving in retirement before the
Correct.
season, like Sewell probably is the most valuable player on that team right now.
For sure. Yep. But yeah, it was good win, man. Good win.
Yeah, it was a must win. You know, we posted a
Mhm.
video for everybody, Lou Gaiman from Lou Gaiman, that Captain Luke Extravaganza podcast that he does. He talked about how today was an absolute must win for the Lions, and it was, because if they had lost this game, I mean, it would have been full out panic mode. You fall to 5-4 and you're going to Philadelphia. Man, you're in a really tough spot. So to come back and not only win this game, but just look completely dominant, and the offense to look as efficient as it could possibly be, and everything, all the questions we had about, certain guys not getting involved, Gibbs having a bad game last week and Jameson Williams being quiet for a while, like all those things got resolved. The offensive line struggles, like there was hardly any struggles today at all. I mean, I don't think there was any issues in terms of communication or blitz breakdowns or anything like that. Like they just looked as efficient as you could possibly be as an offense. It was really, really fun to watch, because you saw all the playmakers that they have really show up today. I mean, every single one of them. So, as a Lion fan, you got to be feeling pretty good coming out of this game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like Lions fans do, we overreact a lot to a loss, right? And how they look. And remember, the Lions didn't look great week 1 either against Green Bay, and then reeled off, some really good looking wins after that. So I mean, it's gonna happen. And again, we talked about it last week. Like, it's the NFL. Like, look what happened today. The Vikings. People want to talk about, hey, you're gonna, like we talked about, and hey, we're gonna build off that win against the Buccaneers coming off the bye week. Let's go. And then they lay an egg. Well, I'm sure people in Minnesota were thinking, yeah, you just beat the Lions, the best team in the NFC. Theoretically, like, now we're going home, and we're gonna play the Ravens, who are struggling, and then they lost to the Ravens, right? So it's just it's a week to week thing, and as fans, like, we get caught up in those emotions, both good and bad when they happen. But yeah, good win. They're feeling good.
Yeah, so I think Lions are in a good place right now. Going forward, a lot is going to be said after this Philadelphia game next week. It's a big showdown game. That's a game we all have circled before the season. So that's going to be a real fun matchup to watch on Sunday Night Football. But Brian, I just want to just wrap up. Kind of the big narrative, the big story from this game is obviously Dan Campbell taking over the play calling, and I'm curious of what you think about just going forward now. Because after a game like this, he's not going to – John Morton isn't going to be calling plays next week. I mean, so
No.
it's going to be Dan Campbell going forward. What does that mean for the rest of the season? What does it potentially mean going into the future and into future seasons? Like, if they're really successful, does he just remain the play caller? Or do they hire a new offensive coordinator next season?
No, why wouldn't he? Like, if he's a believer in John Morton's scheme, and they came to an agreement regarding everything else, and install, the game plan install for the week, and they're all on the same page, I don't see why they would. Now, again, we're not in John Morton's head. Like, we don't know what was said in those meetings and what his expectations were. So at the end of the season, he might say, hey,
What the
I
players
want to.
feel.
So that's something else too. Like,
that.
obviously, like Dan Campbell, because I question that when he got hired, right? And like, typically college athletes, who you get new ones every 4 years, right? In theory, right? I know with the transfers itself, but every 4 years you get new players. So it's easy to kind of be that rah-rah guy. Hey, here's our message, here's our mindset, right? That's a lot harder to do in the NFL, but those guys love playing for Dan Campbell, and they responded today, like you were saying. So if it's working, man, it's working, right? And you got to do what you got to do to win games, and it'll be fun to watch. I mean, it'll be fun to watch.
That's because that might be the formula for success. Is to have the head coach calling the plays, but have somebody in the booth who he highly believes in and trusts
Yeah.
to be his eyes in the sky for him. You know, because then you have when Jared Goff comes on the field, he's talking to Dan Campbell, he's talking to the head coach, he's talking to the guy who's been through the fires with him, you know, through thick and thin from the beginning. So it's an interesting dynamic now where Dan Campbell's on the field as the head coach calling the plays, but he has the former play caller and offensive coordinator in the booth telling him what he sees from up above.
Dan, let me ask you this: who's the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator?
I assume it's Andy. I don't know who it is. It's Andy Reid, though.
Correct. So it's Matt Nagy, right? But we all know Andy Reid, like the buck stops with him, man. Like it's 4th and 1, and they've got a game on the line of the Super Bowl. You know he's making that call, right? You know he's making that call. So it's a big deal, yes, but I'm sure there'll be media types that are going to make a bigger deal than it is. Right, like that's same
a great point.
John,
Andy Reid, like that's the perfect example.
John Gruden, right, when he was coaching, right, who are all his offensive coordinators? Like you better believe he's the final one. Yeah. Okay, Bill Belichick, a defensive guy. Like I know he had those DCs who some of them went on right, but you better believe like when it's time to make that call, you better believe it's Bill Belichick, right? So, but great again overall, awesome.
Yeah, great win, and obviously highly looking forward to next Sunday night. Let's go ahead because we're not going to get a chance to make those predictions, Brian. So let's go ahead and do it here. What do you think about next week against Philadelphia? If you got to throw a prediction out there, it's early in the week. We don't know injuries and things like that might pop up. But
injury.
Throw a pick out. What would you say?
Yeah, injuries. Like, so not knowing the matchups, but the Lions aren't afraid of primetime games. They won in Kansas City. They won in Baltimore, earlier this year. Like we've talked about that ad nauseum. They're not afraid. I think it's going to be a good game. And maybe this is something like, not that they needed to be jump started for anything, but it is a long season. You know what I'm saying? And I think they'll be pretty excited and ready to go into that. I think it's going to be a close game. And I think the Lions are going to win.
Yeah. And you say, man, it's not always bad to have a little adversity in the middle of your season. Like if they can get rolling now, that's. I mean, it's maybe it's a little bit early for that, but it is nice to get kind of going, at this point, as opposed to just being red hot at the beginning and then you start falling off, which is kind of what happened to them last year, where all the injuries started to happen. So, I guess maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, putting us both on the spot to try to make a prediction right now because we want to see how Philly looks tomorrow, Monday Night Football against Green Bay. See how that game goes out because that's going to be a huge game in terms of where the NFC kind of goes going forward. But ideally, Philly wins tomorrow, and then the Lions can go into Philly and be Philly. That'd be
that's
the ideal.
The schedule makers did the Eagles no favors. You play Monday night, tomorrow night, and then Sunday short week. You play Sunday night. That doesn't that only helps the Lions too. So, yep. Yep.
And the other thing too, this was a blowout, and the Lions don't usually do this. They did this tonight, and Jared Goff is 10 minutes left in the game. He's just on the sideline with his hat on and just chilling, just talking to different assistants and different people. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's a little different. I like it. The game's over. You don't need to play these guys. You got a huge game next week. Meanwhile, Philly hasn't even played their game yet. They got to play tomorrow, so they're going to be off a short week and have an incredibly tough game. We're thinking of an incredibly tough game with Green Bay. So,
for sure.
With all those factors, you put all those factors into it. I think the Lions are going to have the advantage. Obviously Philly's at home, and it's always a tough place to play to go into Philly. But to have Philly coming off a short week playing Green Bay, whereas opposed to Lions, smoked Washington, they're going to have a longer rest, the 1 day extra. So I do like the Lions' chances going into Philly. But that's. Man, what a big showdown. What a great showdown that's going to be.
Yep, that's fun. It'll be a fun one.
So I want to kind of jump in real quick, Brian. We don't have to spend too much on this, but just kind of, was there anything around the NFL that kind of caught your eye today, outside of the Lions-Commanders game?
Gosh, like the amount of good teams in the NFC right now, right? I mean, I'm watching Seattle and thinking, gosh, are they the best team in the NFC right now? Like they are playing really well and their defense is playing really well. And Mike McDonald, former Michigan defensive coordinator,
pretty good coach. Awesome. It's not just sign stealing that made him good.
No, yeah, definitely not. No, definitely not.
Crazy,
they did a good job. Yeah, he was good. That impressed me, and the Rams are good too. again. The Rams are good, and all these teams
Stafford's
keep.
playing at MVP level.
He
Man.
is, and
Unreal.
all these teams keep winning. And last year we went from the Lions fighting for the 1 seed to this year. So many good teams. Are the Lions? Are they even going to host a home playoff game in that first round? And they might be they might be healthier and better than a year ago, and they still might not host a home game just because the NFC right now is so good. That's something that stood out to me. And like the Colts are the real deal. And the one thing that's going to hold them back, though, and again, this is kind of what I talked about. People that are close to me know when I talked about with the Lions last year is Jared Goff. Like he's obviously been awesome for what he's done in Detroit, and he's been fantastic. But man, like I'm concerned for the Colts that Daniel Jones is not that high level elite quarterback, but they've got everything else going right now. Sauce Gardner made some plays today. They just traded for him. Jonathan Taylor is going to be it looks like he's going to be on a Hall of Fame pace as a running back, just a dude. But that was something I thought of today, getting geeky. But the big thing was how good the NFC is. And again, the NFL, the Patriots have a 2-game lead over the Bills right now. And the Bills lost to the Dolphins. And like people that question, the Bills in their window, like, gosh, that's why, again, I mean, the Lions in these last few years, it's like your margin of error to win and be a Super Bowl team is so small. And, the Bills, like their season's not over by any means, but they're 6-3, 2 games out of first place, and they got crushed by the Dolphins. Right. So just some interesting tidbits today.
Yeah, the Bills lost to the Dolphins. I think it was might be the most shocking game of the year, in my opinion. I mean, the Bills coming off that Chiefs win, you think they're kind of ascending to be one of the best teams in the NFL, and then they just absolutely lay an egg the very next week to Miami. And it's funny, it's like a lot of people before the season, I think still to this point, if you ask a lot of people, they might say that Buffalo and Detroit are the best teams. Neither one are winning their division right now.
No. Well, so it's always going back to, okay, we can talk. Probably shouldn't talk that much about betting, or we could, and it'd be a really interesting conversation. But if we had to wager right now, who would you put as the Super Bowl favorite? There's no question in my mind. I'm saying the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. It still goes back to that, right? It still just goes back to that, and it doesn't matter going into the playoffs, right? I would still say Patrick Mahomes.
Man, I don't think there is a favorite. Right? I don't.
If you had
so many, you brought up all the good teams in the NFC, and then you bring up the Bills and the Chiefs.
Who are you trusting? Who are you trusting? Like you're like, all right, man, I got one team that I have to pick and put my house on it. It's the Chiefs. Of course it is. Who do you trust?
Yeah, but it's not the margin isn't.
Well, doesn't have to be the margin. No.
Yeah, if you're gonna pick one team, because of the experience and Andy Reid and Mahomes. Yes.
Yeah,
you're gonna put one team because there's so many teams that are no one's dominant. You're going to pick one team out of that bunch to bet your life on. Yeah, I'm going to pick Andy Reid and Mahomes.
Well, there we go.
My point is, I just don't think there's a wide margin. There's a lot of maybe like 7 to 8 teams that you could put in the mix where, man, any one of these have a shot to win it, without question.
Sure. Yep, I agree, but yeah. Well, when you do that, I'm picking the guy that's done it 3 times, and I for sure, absolutely, I would. Yep, absolutely.
I can't blame you on that, but I don't want to get too much into the controversy and all that stuff. But it does come back to the Lions Chiefs game and makes me wonder a little bit because they lose that game. We're not really
maybe we have a show going forward. We can talk about that. Have some fun with that.
Yeah, that's that show definitely requires a deep dive into gambling, because we tried to bring it up and the sports gods kind of shut us down a little bit. Brought us breaking news on Les Miles, or not Les Miles, Brian Kelly.
Right.
Yeah, so we had diverted from our gambling discussion, but one of these days we're going to have to bring it back up. And I'm sure it's not going to actually. I texted you a story about Cleveland, the Cleveland Guardians, with Ortiz and Clase. Ortiz got arrested, and I think Clase might be getting arrested soon, which is just, man, what a mess. What a crazy story that all is. But,
what's scary is you think about if NIL and things like that come to high school sports, and there's talk. I mean, right? Like, who knows? I mean, you're telling me families aren't going to be approached, families that might be struggling, and they might be approached about taking this from this high school or taking this from wherever. Like, who knows? It's brutal.
The unfortunate thing is we're gonna start seeing a lot more of these stories. So
Of course.
it's unfortunate, but so we got to enjoy it. We got to enjoy it while we can kind of put our heads in the sand a little bit for now and kind of enjoy what sports brings us. And another one of those things that sports brings us, the college football Saturdays, man. There's nothing in sports that I love more than college football Saturdays. And another good one yesterday. And we had some, we're always at least a few good games, and there was quite a few yesterday. But we look into college football Saturday from yesterday. Some of the things that stood out to me, the biggest one that stood out to me was that Oregon Iowa game. What a fantastic game. I know a lot of people wouldn't think it's great. It was kind of raining, the weather was nasty, it was Iowa, so it's just kind of a little bit of a slog. But man, it was just, those were two good Big Ten teams just battling it out, and in a matchup that's we haven't seen quite a bit is Oregon Iowa, and that's what you're getting with this new Big Ten, with these Pac-12 teams coming in, is you're going to get some matchups that you don't normally see. And to see Oregon, you have to go into Iowa and play a game like that, play a game where you have to be tough and run the football in bad weather. And man, they were throwing out, I think, 3 or 4 different running backs and just were running the ball at will. And we're able to come out with an 18-16 win in Iowa in just a great football game.
I thought you were going to say the best thing that came out of yesterday was that we found out that Michigan State, Penn State this Saturday is going to be the CBS game of the week. Both teams are 3-6. I thought that's not it. I mean, goodness. All jokes aside, to my Michigan State friends, I apologize, but no, that was a fun game to watch, and it felt like a typical Big Ten game. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, a typical
old school Big Ten,
and it just felt like for as long as I've been alive watching college football, it just felt like Iowa football games are exactly what happened yesterday. Like every Iowa game is like
game you've ever seen.
It's
Iowa.
Crazy, and it's
exactly
crazy.
That.
But Kirk Ferentz, I mean, that's the way he coaches, and good for him. I mean, he does a lot with a little. You know what I'm saying? For a kind of middle of the road, middle tier college football program, but. No, there was again. I think it was good to see like Penn State. All jokes aside, like they still had their roster is still really good, right? And to see Indiana, that was really the first time in a long time they've had to come back like that and make a play and make plays to win a game in a hostile environment, and they did. So you're not going to blow everybody out, and so that was pretty awesome. And I'm interested to see again what the college football playoff rankings are going to be tomorrow, because there's the debate like crazy. Texas, are they going to be back in the top 10? What happens to Georgia Tech? Is Texas, who started the season number 1 overall, are they going to be in the top 10 again? And then we talked about this last week, I'm not a fan of automatic bids. Actually, I don't know if we've talked about this a lot, Dan. I'm not a fan of automatic bids. And so right now the ACC is a mess. And it looks like right now Georgia Tech is going to be as a favorite to win the ACC. And then, the group of 5 is going to be North Texas right now. Right. And that's projected. You know what I mean? And so it's just weird. And I remember people said, well, when you expand the playoff, you're getting to give more opportunities to more schools. Yeah, you know who you're giving more opportunities to? Let me look. The SEC, and there are 5 or 6 teams that are projected to be in the Big Ten. Those are the ones you're giving more opportunities to. But again, I think what's cool, similar to the NFL, is as good as Ohio State is, and they look as good as Texas A&M is, as good as Indiana is, and whoever. It's not like it was 10 years ago, or maybe even where it was Alabama and everybody else, or it was Georgia and everybody else, LSU and everybody else, even prior back, Miami and everybody else. This feels similar to last year, which there could be a lot of teams. I think pretty much any of the first 6 teams that I'm looking at right now that Tom Fornelli has, I think, projected at CBSSports.com. Ohio State, Texas A&M, Indiana, Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. I'd have no problem thinking any one of those teams would be a national champion, right? Yeah. After that, though, you're talking Texas Tech. But then you do get Oregon and Notre Dame. But it's hard to see. But then again, I don't know. College football is weird right now.
I want to get your opinion on this real quick. I saw this a lot going on Twitter, and people getting frustrated about how high Notre Dame was in
Yeah.
comparison to Miami, who both teams have 2 losses, and Notre Dame went into Miami and lost in week 1. So my question to you, Brian, is how much should head-to-head be the end-all be-all, or is it just one factor into several different metrics to rank these teams?
So I remember the year, it was Nick Saban's last season at Michigan State. In Michigan State, we've talked about that game before. I think Michigan State beat Michigan. Drew Henson started the game. Tom Brady finished it off. It was in East Lansing. Michigan State wins. They go 10-2, and at the end of the year, they finished in a tie with Michigan. And Michigan went to, I think, the Orange Bowl, and Michigan State went to the Citrus Bowl, right? And people are like, "Oh, what are you doing? Head-to-head matters." But then the argument was, "Well, no, Michigan lost a close game on the road, and they were the better team at the end of the season." Like, I think there's validity to both, but like, can you imagine in the NFL? Like, well, I know we lost to that team, but we're the better team at the end of the year. We're not gonna look at that as a tiebreaker. Like it has to mean something. The head to head has to mean something, right? And it has to mean, at the very least, a tiebreaker. And so, I think Miami. I think Miami has 2 losses as well. Correct?
They do. Yeah, they both have 2 losses.
They both have 2 losses. Like I'm sorry, that head to head needs to mean something, even if. Because again, it goes back to, I mean, we can go around in circles. Like, was the team healthy? When Ohio State played Michigan a year ago, Ohio State wasn't healthy up front, right? And that was the worst possible area to not, be 100%, against Michigan, and they lost. Like the game, when it comes down to tiebreakers like that, has to mean something, right? In my opinion. And so for me, that would give the nod to Miami.
Yeah, and it just makes it tough though, because it has to, your 2 losses have to matter too. Who did you lose to? Were those bad losses?
Okay, but do they have to matter? Because Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois a year ago, and they made the playoff and ended up being fine and went to the national title. I mean, I don't like it's not like college bet. Oh, the quality of loss. They lost to Miami by 3. Notre Dame lost to Miami by 3, lost to Texas A&M by 1 at home. Oh, they've got quality losses. Yeah, but their best win is potentially, it's looking like USC right now. Right? They got a chance to get another top 25 win next week against Pitt. But like, I don't know. It's tough, right? It's tough. I think head to head has to matter when it comes to tiebreakers. When it comes to that, I do. But
if Notre Dame was truly in the ACC, that would be the tiebreaker.
That would be no doubt. Well, no doubt. But keep this in mind too, though. Like, because going back to college football, I mean, I've always said it's been a mythical national championship, right? Like, okay, whose brand is better and bigger? Is it Notre Dame or Miami? I know Miami has a brand, but it's nothing compared to Notre Dame.
Miami is a big brand, but Notre Dame is definitely
nothing compared to Notre Dame, right? So you're telling me if there's a tiebreaker, the powers that be, the suits, right, that are making those decisions in that committee, they're going to say, let's go with the U. Absolutely not. They're going with Notre Dame. So you gotta, it's not right, but that comes into play. It does.
That's unfortunately, that is one of the metrics as well. No one's going to say it publicly, but we all know it's definitely a factor.
Of course. Yep. Of course. But it was a fun day yesterday. Like, I mean, the Big 12, okay, Texas Tech had a big win over BYU. They were both ranked 7th or 8th and 7th.
How much? Let's talk about that for a minute. Like, how much? It's funny because if you talk to just the casual college football fan and you say, what is the biggest game? You talk to like throughout the week. What is the biggest college football game going into the weekend? How many casual college football fans are going to say, yeah, of course, it's Texas Tech BYU.
None.
It's a top 10 matchup.
How many casual fans would know that was a game to see who determines first place in the Big 12? Nobody would think, they wouldn't. Like, I mean, maybe if that was Oklahoma, Nebraska back in the early to mid 90s, that'd be a pretty sweet game, but like nobody thinks like that. I don't think so. Nobody thinks like that anymore. I think you could argue that Wake Forest beating Virginia was the biggest game of the week. And again, it's not on anybody's radar.
Because that was another one I was going to bring up with you is as from a Michigan fan's perspective, that actually was a pretty big outcome, because you look at the teams that are ahead of Michigan, kind of in that 10 to 20 range that Michigan has to jump over if they're going to make this run. Our teams like the Virginias that fell, Like there was a couple teams in that range. Obviously, Iowa being one that Michigan needed to fall, and they fell to Oregon. And
Although,
it's
Dan,
just funny that
Michigan's
like a Virginia Wake Forest game, like in November, it's like, yeah, that's a game that's meaningful. Like in no other year would that ever mean anything. Even with
right.
even if you replace the names and you just put the rankings as the number 14 team against an unranked team, you
Yeah.
could put any names you want in there. Anytime in November in any years past, we were like, oh, who cares? What's the big deal? But now, because of the expanded playoffs, that game actually has some meaning to people outside of the fan
Sure.
bases of those two teams playing.
And that is a fair point. That makes it pretty cool for the playoff. The playoff people, the playoff supporters. That is a cool point. And to your point though, I think Michigan, whoever is above them right now, it doesn't matter, because if they win out and beat the number 1 team in the country, they're in the top 12. They just are.
I
Right?
think so too, but it's
they just are.
still, and we talked about the aspect of that it's Michigan.
Yep.
It is going to play a factor. If
sure.
it was Boise State or whoever, even a Virginia or somebody like that, like it wouldn't matter. But the fact that it's Michigan, that's going to give them an edge, which shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that. It should be who you believe with your eye test, and as well as looking at different actual metrics. Top wins to how bad were your losses. This, that, and the other. But it would take away more debates. There'll be less debates of like, okay, how many 2-team losses are actually trying to get into those final spots? It's, those are a couple less teams that Michigan's going to have to deal with if they are able to get into that position and win out and finish at 10-2.
So what, another good conversation is, the talk about, is, should it be the 12 most deserving, or is the automatic bids in the current structure getting a power 5, non-power 5 team in there? Okay. I still think the college football is trending to the 2 super divisions, the 2 super conferences, and it's going to be the best 12. And yesterday, something like that game, the fact that like, okay, yeah, Texas Tech, BYU, sure, was a big game, right? But put Texas Tech or BYU on a neutral field against Miami or Michigan, right? Or Tennessee with 3 losses. Who's favored?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The 5th or 6th best team in the SEC and put them up against Texas Tech or BYU. I mean, we could have that discussion of like who we think would win, but if you just put up the Vegas, like where's the spread going to go? The SEC team's going to be favored.
No doubt. Oh, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. Or even the Big Ten. Like, yeah, I think they would be favored too. Right. So that's debated and been debated forever. And this is the system we have right now. And I think I wish there was more intrigue there. Like the intrigue is down. It's going to be down at the final couple playoff spots. Right. Because for the most part, Ohio, unless there's a major collapse, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, like, they're all in. Right, they're pretty sure they're all in, and like even Notre Dame, right, without really having a significant win on their resume, they're in.
Yeah,
so
they're already 10th. I mean, they just got to win out and they're in.
Clearly. Right. Yeah.
So even though there's going to be probably quite a few other 2-loss teams that would have an argument, but it's not going to be an argument like Notre Dame would be in.
There's going to be a year where we've had craziness before, and then the people that want to expand it to 32 are going to scream and say, see, what if we had that situation where there's 5 2-loss teams in the SEC, right? I mean, what do you do? So that'll happen. But
yeah, if Oklahoma beats Alabama next week, that you are creating a pretty chaotic situation in the SEC, because they're all kind of would be all in the same boat.
Which could happen, right? I mean, which could happen. And that's college football, though. I mean, that's what makes it fun. The other thing, like I talked about Indiana yesterday, like that catch, the game-winning catch at the end of the game was incredible. That was something else. That was awesome. Omar Cooper Jr. Like that was awesome in that situation. That's obviously something that that's one of those, if you look back and they win the national championship, that's going to be a play that's remembered forever in the state of Indiana for their program. That was pretty awesome.
And Fernando Mendoza just leading them down the field in Penn State, in the Happy Valley. And obviously, Penn State's obviously incredibly down right now. They got a lame back, interim coach right now. Just not a great situation. But in that moment, the crowd was into it. They were fired up. They wanted to win. They wanted to see some positivity after this, awful season that they've been having. And for Indiana, with Mendoza leading them down, to have that game-winning touchdown drive at the end of that game, I think proved a lot about Indiana. Obviously, Penn State is struggling, but in that moment, Penn State was playing up to their capabilities and their talent level and the roster that they have. And it was in Penn State. And although there was a lot of Indiana fans, in that moment, it was loud. It was chaotic. Well, it was, that's a tough environment to have to make that type of drive. And, you can't say the season was on the line because where things are at with the expanded playoffs, but still, you're trying to get an undefeated season. You're trying to get into the Big Ten championship and all those things that Indiana hasn't had. And he's trying to go for the Heisman too, as well.
Yeah. Well,
that drive at the end of the game said a lot about Indiana and said a lot about him.
Well, and you just said it. But Penn State is like their roster again. They're full of 4 and 5 stars, so it's not like they were devoid of talent. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the one part where I'm not surprised it was a close game. And to your point, to the teams we just mentioned or I just said, right? I said Alabama, Ohio State, Texas A&M, even to a degree, Georgia, right? Like they've had multitude of success nationally. Indiana has not. So as much as I say, and we say, oh, the expanded playoff, well, doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Just get into the playoff. Well, it's a big deal for Indiana to win the Big Ten. Like it's still going to, for that program, it's a big deal for them to go to the Big Ten championship game and win the Big Ten championship if they do that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was big for them. And they're not looking at it like, hey, just get into the playoff again. I think they want to raise banners, add banners to their stadium, man. And a lot of fun that game.
Yeah. Still a lot of the interesting games to go. Got a few more weeks left in the regular season, and around here we're hoping Michigan can do what they need to do these next 2 weeks at Wrigley Field against Northwestern this coming Saturday, and then go into Maryland and set up the game against Ohio State in a couple of weeks.
But don't you think we talked about this with Michigan and Michigan State a couple of weeks ago? It's just good for college football when the rivalry games are against 2 good teams that mean something. You know what I mean? It's not as fun when one team is way better than the other. Like Florida.
Yeah. And what I was just going to say, what's funny about it is usually when you get this situation, let's say both teams went out going into that game, right? Ohio State's the number 1 team in the country, undefeated. Michigan goes in 10-2. Usually it's the undefeated team going into that game in the past where everything is on the line for that team.
Yeah.
Right. And if they lose everything they've been going for, all their goals, Big Ten championship, national championship, they can be gone by that 10-2 team beating them. Now it's still just as big, but it's reversed on what team it matters for.
That is
Ohio State would be trying to ruin Michigan's season, even though Ohio State goes into that game, it's the number 1 team in the country. Because if they win, they prevent Michigan from getting into the playoff.
So it's in a way, it's again, that's the NFL comparison to a T, right? Because how many NFL teams at the end of that season going to that last game are like, wow, do we rest our guys? We're already in the playoffs. No, if they play everybody, they're trying to not let that team get into the playoff. That's exactly what is happening. That's exactly what is happening. But I don't like it. Ohio State's in a situation where they've lost 4 in a row. They have to win that game. Ryan Day has to win that game. I know he's won a national championship, but he has to win that game, right? So he's going to play all his dudes. But what if Jeremiah Smith is 50-50 and his ankle's bad, right? Or Julian Sain
something the week before.
Yeah, what? That just a different world. A lot of intrigue still, but
it's different. It's still the circumstances still make it big. This iteration. Assuming it goes the way we think it's going to go and where the teams are going to be at that point, it's just the narrative's flipped. It's weird. It's really weird. But I just hope it gets to that point because it's my favorite game. It is my favorite game in all of sports when it matters and when it's big. And if it plays out the way we think that it's going to play it, where both teams went out going into that game, it's despite the expanded playoffs, despite all the things that both of us don't love. That game is still, at least for this season, is going to be big. The last game of the regular season. So I'm hoping it plays out that way.
Yeah. I think.
And Brian, I'm going to throw. I'll go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think we both think it is gonna play out that way,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
Michigan's gonna. I mean, they're gonna
And
win
we
the next two.
They better. They better. So we can wrap it up with the college football talk, Brian. I just wanted, before we sign off, I didn't have this on the show sheet, so I'm kind of throwing this at you a little bit, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of things that happened with the Tigers this
Mhm.
week. Jack Flaherty accepted his qualifying over. He's going to be back with the Tigers for 1 year at $20 million, and then Gleyber Torres, a qualifying offer for potentially for $22 million, it is out there that he still needs to decide whether he's going to take that or not. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, first on Jack Flaherty, and then second on potentially Gleyber Torres maybe being back next year.
Yeah, I think Flaherty obviously likes being in Detroit, right? And he got traded and re-signed, back with Detroit. So I think there is something to that, that he likes being here and he likes Chris Fetter and he likes what the Tigers are doing. I also think he didn't have his best season, so he probably thinks he's not getting that number out in the open market. So there was that aspect to it as well. So, and for the Tigers, I don't know. I mean, does that signal that they are they excited about Jack Flaherty taking that number? Maybe not. But it is what it is at the moment. And so as a fan, like I like Jack Flaherty, right? I mean, I know he wasn't great last year, but he had some innings where he did some good things and had some games where he was really good. So fully expect a bounce back year. But does it impact their ability if they were really planning on re-signing Tarek Skubal? I don't know, right? Because that's a big number for a year. But it shouldn't. I mean, it probably shouldn't. If you're looking to get Skubal long term, it shouldn't. It shouldn't affect that. So I think all those factors come into play. Overall, if you're a Tiger fan, I mean, it's not your money. It's not our money, right? Do I think it'll hinder them getting other guys? No. So I think they needed that. Like we had talked about their rotation depth and what happened to them at the end of the season. So yeah, Flaherty taking that and re-signing, I'm down with that. Gleyber Torres, same thing. Like I don't know how many teams are gonna use what happened at the end of the season against him. Right? He obviously was dealing with the sports hernia and struggled a little bit toward the end of the year, but he did a lot of good things at second base for the Tigers. And so qualifying offer, if somebody signs him, the Tigers are gonna get a comp pick out of that. So smart on their end. And so I don't know when Torres has to. I think he has a deadline to have to agree or not to that, but no, not bad by any means, I think, by the Tigers. And I'd be happy with getting Gleyber Torres back as well. Like I don't see a situation. I know you had talked about McGonigal maybe getting some second base innings there, but I don't see a situation where the Tigers can, without making a trade, significantly improve at second base. You're not going to get much better than Gleyber Torres with what he did. And if he stays healthy, like you're really happy with it. You're really happy with that. So good start. I mean, pretty good start to the offseason.
Yeah, I'm hoping Torres takes that offer. I think he will.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes sense for him to, because he kind of had the 1 year prove it year, and he was having a year. He was proving it, the
Mm-hmm.
first half, but then the injury happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense, I think, from his perspective, like, hey, well, let me go back to a team where that first half of the season, if I can play that out for a full season and then go into free agency, maybe that he can get that big long-term deal that he's really seeking. So to do it just as a 1 year, $22 million, I think makes a lot of sense for both teams. I hope he takes it. And I think if I had to make a prediction, I think he will end up taking that. And I mean, you look at Gleyber Torres, that first half of the year, if there was a hitter on that team where if I could pick one hitter to come up at the plate in an important at bat, he was the guy. And I remember being at a game against Houston where it was Hunter Brown against Skubal, where they were just going. I mean, it was 0-0. I think 0-0 either in the bottom of the ninth or they went into the 10th inning. And the Tigers ended up getting the bases loaded. And I'm like, and Torres came up. I'm like, this is the guy. This is the guy I want up because he's going to have a professional at bat. He's not going to swing at miss at bad pitches. And sure enough, he ended up drawing a walk, and it was a walk-off walk, and they won 1-0.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, what a great professional baseball player he is. And unfortunately, he had the injury in the second half, and it was unknown. Nobody knew in the fan. I'm sure they knew in the clubhouse they knew about it, but in terms of the fan base, we didn't know. We thought he was just kind of struggling and fading. But as it turns out, he was playing with a sports hernia and battling it out throughout the rest of the season. So it would be nice to see him come back and have a full healthy year and see what he could do with a full healthy season.
For sure. And shout out to Hunter Brown, Wayne State University, go Warriors for all my
Yeah.
fellow Warriors out there. But like, yeah, I agree. And he was the one guy in the lineup for all the Tigers' issues when it came to putting the ball in play. He was the one guy that you kind of felt like, all right, if he's up, the ball, he's not going to strike out, right? I mean, even toward the end of the year when he wasn't healthy. And I think, I mean, I'm sure he and his agent know or are finding out. I don't think there are many teams that are going to want to give him a long-term deal right now as it is anyway, right? Maybe because of the injury, although that's not something that typically affects you a lot. But he's in his early 30s, I believe, right? Late 20s, early 30s. So him getting anything bigger than a 3-year deal would probably be surprising as it is. But I agree with you. I think he's going to resign. And then if the Tigers, if they bring back the majority of their roster, if they bring back Skubal and make maybe a couple bullpen arms similar to last year, going back with his roster, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to lie to you. We hope for more, but I'm fine with that. And thinking again, though, something's going to happen at the trade deadline. I guess that's the caveat, right? Like, I'd be okay with.
I don't like that approach. I don't like that approach because
Well,
you don't know what the trade deadline is going to look like. You're just hoping that there's going to be guys available, but you don't know. But you know what's out there right now. You know the free agents that are available. You know the guys that you can go out and get, and you don't have to give up anything to get them. You just have to give up money.
I think they have.
Like,
I
would rather, if
course.
you're going to, I do not depend on the trade deadline to save yourself.
Of course.
If you're
I think
go for it and try to get the best free agents that are available.
Well, here's what I mean. And by the way, Gleyber Torres is 28. So like, again, though, like, are people going to give him, I don't know what exactly he's looking for years wise, but I still think it'd be hard for teams that are going to want to give him a long-term deal. But yeah, if I had my choice, of course, like I'd rather like get after it right now, right? Like the Tigers teams under Dave Dombrowski did, and those guys names we mentioned, Gary Sheffield, Victor Martinez, you name it, Justin Upton. But again, though, if like the trade deadline, they were a Game 5 score run and Game 5 at bat away from being in the ALCS still. So that they're, even with all their flaws, they're pretty close. You know what I mean? They're pretty close. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Worst case, I mean, I don't think I would be more okay to your point if Jack Flaherty doesn't, take the player option and he leaves and Gleyber Torres ends up not re-signing, then I'd be a little bit more like, okay, like, heck yeah, we definitely need to do something now because now I think he just got worse. You know what I mean? You don't want Zach McKinstry playing second base every day. Even though he did just win a Silver Slugger, but you still, right? He's still better. He's still better in his role. So I'm with you to that point.
Yeah, and I mean all this. I mean it's all small potatoes compared to the huge cloud that's hanging over him. Mm-hmm. What are they going to do with Skubal? And it continues to be fascinating. I posted something on Facebook earlier this week where he had the two top ESPN insiders. I think it was Buster Olney and Jeff Passan, both had opposite of, they both have sources claiming this. And one says that it looks like Skubal's probably going to get traded. And then the other one says, well, it looks like most likely he's not going to get traded. I'm like, did you guys have any interaction with each other before putting these reports out? Because obviously you guys got opposite sources that are saying two completely different things. But it's just funny that the top two guys at ESPN had completely different reports on where things are leaning with Skubal. It just goes to show you nobody knows right now. Nobody knows.
No, I wonder if like I probably like Scott Harris, I'm sure is gathering, or he has been gathering like the prospect lists of the available guys for each potential suitor for Tarik Skubal, right? And if he's having those conversations with those other GMs, it's okay. Who are you making available, right? And it might be, a list A of these guys, a list B of these guys, and it could be something as easy as like Harris is just waiting to figure out, or maybe just testing the waters, like, okay, which organization is really willing to go in all of this, right? And obviously, the obvious one that everybody keeps going back to is the Mets. Big market, all right, a fan base, and they had a disappointing season for as much as they put into their roster, right? They're in a win now situation. I think it makes complete sense for it to be the Mets. I do. Can they have conversations with Skubal and Scott Boras ahead of time to say, hey, like, is he interested in resigning in the Big Apple? I think all those come into play, right? And I think if Skubal is willing to sign long term with the Mets, then man, the Tigers better rake them over the coals. I mean, they just better McLean. Right? I know you disagree, but they better freaking get everybody. If he's willing to, if it comes out that he's willing to sign long term somewhere, like you get everybody.
Yeah,
that's what I think. Yep.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Jeff Passan brought it up, and it was a really good, interesting point where he was on the Rich Eisen show, and they were talking about Skubal, and he's like, well, the Tigers would really love to have him back, and Skubal would really love to be there long term, but the problem is the money.
Yep.
And he talked about like how when the money becomes a factor as it is, and you don't know if you go into free agency if you're going to be able to keep him, and most likely you're probably not. You kind of put in a situation where you almost feel like you have to trade him. The guy that you drafted, the guy that you went out and found, you drafted him later in around the 9th round, something like that. Mm-hmm. Obviously not a top first, couple round pick. And you signed him, you found him, you scouted him, you drafted him, you developed him, you've turned him in to this monster, this best pitcher in baseball. And now you feel like you are stuck in a position that you have to trade him, the face of the franchise, the player that you developed, a homegrown player. You feel like you have to trade him because of the structure of how baseball is right now. And that's going to be a big factor going into this collective bargaining agreement where baseball is right now. The structure of baseball where teams feel like they're forced to make the trade of your best player because of how the finances work. And really only one of the top 5 teams in baseball in terms of money, in terms of the media market, is going to be able to get him, is going to be able to afford to get him. And it makes sense for that team to spend that money to get him. And if you put, when he talked about like all the teams that you think of that you could put in that situation, they would all kind of, except for maybe 4 or 5 teams, would feel like they are forced to trade him because of where baseball is right now.
Yeah. I mean, you know what though? History of sports, it's happened before. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers traded Wayne Gretzky to LA. You know what I mean? The best hockey player ever. Like it's the reality of the current situation. Do I think Chris Ilitch has the money to resign Tarik Skubal? I do. You know what I mean? And I don't think there's a willingness there. I think that's just who Chris Ilitch is right now as the owner of the Tigers. And do I think Mike Ilitch would have done everything he could to sign him? For sure. In the situation, right? Because remember when they traded Verlander, they were kind of they were not a playoff team, and that's a little bit different situation. Like this is pretty unique and potentially unprecedented that your number 1 pitcher, best in baseball, on a two-time when you're this close, when you're two-time playoff winning team. That's pretty tough. That's challenging. I wonder too, how much AJ Hinch his influence is on this as well. So like, I don't know. I think he's going into his 4th year as a Tiger manager, 5th year as a Tiger manager. Like he's got a pretty good clubhouse. I mean, it seems like all those guys get along. You know what I'm saying? They seem to be pretty close knit. I mean, is he in there saying like, hey man, like I'm here, like, no, we're going for it. We're close. Like we got to sign this guy. We can't trade this guy right now. He gives us the best chance to win. I'm curious because, his situation, like, it came out that he got extended. We don't know how many years. But like, does he want to manage in Detroit if the Tigers are going to be run like this? Right. And they're, or are they doing everything they can to resign Tarik Skubal? Right. Because Tarik Skubal has to get.
Okay. I was just gonna. I'm sorry to cut you off, but what if he is looking at the farm system and thinking that's where it is? That's where these guys are coming.
I don't know if
a trade brings those guys, brings more prospects and adds to it.
I don't know if a manager thinks that. Like, I agree with you. A general manager and President Scott Harris, like in the front office, can look at it that way. I don't know if, as a competitor in the dugout every day, looks at it that way.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? I'm the human being. I don't know if he looks at it that way. But that is a fair point. And Tarik Skubal's point too. Like, yes, he wants to stay. He said he would love to stay in Detroit, and the Tigers obviously want to re-sign him. But like, it'll completely mess up the market, and that going back to your point about this, the status of baseball right now, right? He can't get less than he's worth.
Can't do it.
He just can't do it because then you're screwing the other guys. Like the union will have a fit. Like he just can't do it, right? And
he's one of the players. He's a player rep in the union.
And of course,
I mean, all these factors play in.
They all do. Of course, it does. It does suck. It does suck. Yeah. I mean, it's not. it is why it was it is, and that's a problem. I think people compare it to the NFL a lot and say, hey, you need a hard salary cap, things like that, right? I mean, the MLB does have the luxury tax. I think the bigger issue is there needs to be a salary floor, right? Because with revenue sharing and whatnot, you can be a team that is just getting money from the Dodgers and the Yankees or the Red Sox or whoever with those big TV deals and stuff, right? And you don't have to put forth any effort into having a roster because you're just collecting that revenue sharing. Or if you're the A's, right? Like I get it why owners, of those teams would have a problem with that. Like no, like you need to spend X amount of dollars and try to have a competitive roster, or you shouldn't be an owner
You
of the
should
team,
have to spend an X amount of your profit.
for sure.
You shouldn't be able to just not put money into your roster, put money into your stadium, try to, if in the A's situation where you're basically demanding that it's public money that pays for your new stadium, or you're not going to play there, you end up playing in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure they're profiting money. I mean,
course.
in terms
I'm
of the
sure they
revenue
are.
share and everything and luxury tax, like they have to be profiting money, and then they're not putting any money back into their team. They're not putting money back into the stadium. Like it's absurd. That should not be allowed.
No, I'm with you. I agree, and that's been a problem forever. But it'll be. I hope baseball and the people involved and the powers that be are smart enough to recognize that like they just had an amazing season with an amazing playoff and an amazing World Series, and like baseball is like cool again. You know what I mean? It's fun to watch. It seems to be moving quickly, and there's some personalities, right? And baseball's always been criticized for not marketing their best players. Where there's some personalities out there, Shohei Ohtani, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like, I hope they realize, like, man, we can't screw this up, because if they do, like, people might come back again, just like they did after the strike in '95, or '94. But it might not be as quick as you think. Like, see, There's other things fans can do. So. I think
They
a deal.
cannot
Yeah,
afford to
no,
have an extended lockout that loses games. They cannot afford to lose
no.
games.
I
They
I don't
can't.
think it gets to that point. I think there'll be a deal done before then. I do. So
Because you mentioned it, in terms of how good of a season this was, the ratings were through the roof.
yeah,
Some of the highest rated playoff games they've had in decades. And to have Toronto, where you're going to get the whole country of Canada watching and supporting, and then you have LA, as much as people can say like, oh, LA is ruining baseball. Well, it's helping quite a bit globally, because you have these international stars and these stars from Japan who are flooding that team.
Yep.
And now you're expanding the game globally. You're huge not only in America, you're huge in Canada, you're huge in Japan, and they're continuing to expand. Like they're in a really good spot right now, and they can't drop the ball, man. They can't drop the ball because they're going to argue over money and argue over the structure of baseball. Like they have a time structure. They're going to have months to get this done. They have to get it done. They cannot afford to have an extended lockout that costs them games.
No, I agree. So it'll be interesting, man.
But we don't know. Like I'm sure if we were had a podcast in '94, I'm sure we would have been screaming, "You cannot lose a season to lose a World Series after the season that they were having." Montreal. I just watched the documentary on the Montreal Expos, and they were talking about the '94 season, and they were the best team in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
The entire country of Canada is rooting for them. You're getting huge, in another country, and they ended up canceling the whole season, the second half of the season in the World Series. It took, as you mentioned, man, it took a long time for people to come back after that. And there was talks in that documentary, like that's what killed the Expos.
Yeah,
like had they had a good
sure,
season, or had they played the rest of the season, now perhaps they, if not make a run, maybe they win the whole thing.
Yeah, they were loaded. Larry Walker, Moises Alou Jr. I mean, Pedro Martinez. Like they were loaded. They were loaded. Yep, loaded.
Unbelievable.
I agree. And that, you don't want that to happen again, man. You don't want it to happen again.
Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. We got the winter meetings coming up, and obviously this huge cloud that's hanging over Detroit sports and the Detroit Tigers. What is going to happen with school? And I found it interesting. I saw Jeff Rieger tweeted it out. Just mentioned something about school, and somebody commented, "You still going to talk about this? You got to stop talking about this." He's just like, no. I mean, he's justifiably so. Like this is one of the most fascinating and biggest topics in Detroit sports that we've seen in a long time. And there's so many factors that play into it, and so many things that play out. And you could be on either side of the fence of whether they should trade him, whether they should not trade him, whether they should keep him for another year. If you lose him, you just get a draft pick. There's so many things that go into it that make it fascinating. And, obviously we're going to continue to talk about and continue to watch it. And, man, there's gonna come a time where we're probably gonna have an emergency podcast, Brian, to discuss the issue. But
I'll be ready.
It's gonna be interesting.
I'll be ready.
Yeah, Detroit sports is incredibly fascinating. We're going to continue to cover it here inside the coach's office and across all of our podcasts and Michigan Sports Entertainment. But for this show tonight, that'll do it. And for Brian Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you again next week.